Welcome to the Street Smart Wisdom Podcast from WisdomFeed. I'm Steve Stein. In this series, we talk to best-selling authors and thought leaders doing great work in the world of mindfulness, wellness, and creativity. Our mission is to bring ancient ideas down to street level and bring you takeaways that you can apply to everyday life. Enjoy. This podcast is sponsored by BetterListen.com. At BetterListen, we have hundreds of audios, courses, and programs available to stream and download. As a listener to the Street Smart Wisdom Podcast, you are eligible for a free audiobook download. Just visit BetterListen.com/free today. Welcome to this edition of the Street Smart Wisdom Podcast. My name is Steve Stein. Our guest today, Shelly Tygielski. She is the creator of Epidemic of Love, a mindfulness teacher, and an incredible motivator. In this wisdom profile, Shelly tells us what makes her tick and how she has gotten on this path of service, mindfulness, and making the world a better place. Welcome, everyone. My name is Steve Stein, and I'm the host of the Street Smart Wisdom Podcast, and we are happy and privileged to have Shelly Tygielski as a guest today. And Shelly has been doing some incredible work over the last few years. I was fortunate to meet her at the Wisdom 2.0 event in New York a few months ago, BC, before Corona, and while things were different. And it's a privilege and honor and all that good stuff to have her here today. So welcome, Shelly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Steve.
Absolutely. So I wanted to invite you today to do a couple of things, talk about the incredible work that you're doing, but also find out who you are. And we have a segment we call like a wisdom profile. So, what are your roots? Or, explain to us who you are, what you do in broad strokes, and then we can get into some of the specific things that you're doing.
Sure. Well, that's such a loaded question. Who are you? So, being that we don't have all the time in the world, what I'll tell you is, I guess, who I am to the outside world. I am a full-time mindfulness teacher, specifically a trauma-informed mindfulness teacher. I'm a community organizer, and I am also an activist, not just in the social justice areas or arenas, but also I'm a self-care activist. And it's really a lot of the work that I do through self-care and helping social justice organizations build communities of care, that a lot of the work that I do on the community organizing side is really informed. I'm also a mom to a really great 18-year-old kid who's about to go off to college and make his way in the world. And I'm a daughter and a wife and a sister, and a friend to many. So in a nutshell, I'd say if that was my inscription on my tombstone, maybe that would be it.
No, that I don't know if it'll fit in a tweet, but we can hopefully on your tombstone in 3,000 years. That's why they'll probably have digital tombstones at some point where you can click for more.
Right, exactly.
But no, thank you for the snapshot. So what is trauma-informed mindfulness? I've never really heard that term before.
So trauma-informed mindfulness is basically, it stemmed out of the realization that a lot of these incredible contemplative practices that are steeped in tradition and certainly now in scientific research can actually activate or trigger individuals in a way that can cause harm unintentionally, of course, rather than healing as it is intended to do. And even when an individual doesn't necessarily present as having, let's say, some massively traumatic event that happened in their life, whether it was over years or one occurrence of, an event, you don't necessarily need to have PTSD as an illness to experience any type of, negative reaction or response to traditional contemplative practices. So the trauma-informed mindfulness route basically says, look, we know that even in non-traumatized populations, if you will, or normal populations, that sometimes the use of mindfulness or meditation can have an adverse effect, before it eventually kind of emerges into the light, so to speak. And so knowing that you're going to administer or take individuals that we know have the onset of trauma or are dealing with with post-traumatic stress disorder, how do you approach their healing in a way that is more informed, with greater care, and more importantly, gives them choices? Because what we often find with populations that are dealing with trauma is that in some ways, the trauma was thrust on them, right? And so they feel like they don't have control over anything, their life, the choices that are made for them, the choices that were made for them that resulted in the situation that they're in, or the way that they're feeling at this point in time. And so allowing them to make choices still in this practice. And I'll give you a very, very simple example. As a meditation teacher, oftentimes when we're guiding people, we instruct them and say, sit this way, close your eyes, and you're kind of giving these prompts of what you're supposed to do. Whereas as a trauma-informed teacher, quite simply, you don't say, close your eyes. You say, if you feel so inclined, you may close your eyes. Or if you prefer to leave them open, you can leave them open, and here's another way to practice. So you're essentially giving and choices to individuals. And you're making sure that you're removing as many unknowns as possible, so that they know what to expect, and that they know that they're not being held like in a captive way, but that they are actually in control and they're in the driver's seat. Okay.
So, well, that's a new term, and that makes sense. And trauma is is a word that maybe 3-4 years ago was, or 2-3 years ago was something I would think about an emergency room. But now, in caregivers, all of a sudden it has other layers of meaning. So how did you prepare to do this? What's your background in terms of, were you a therapist? Were you, or just meditation, or just I know one of the part of your background is you're a skater girl. So did that prepare you for this in any way?
Not at all, actually. But my background's actually, I was in corporate America for almost 2 decades. Certainly, I'm sure that a lot of the skill sets I learned in terms of communicating with people effectively, being a presenter, a leader, somebody who can rally people around, like obviously all those skill sets are transportable, they're exportable, transferable and exportable. But insofar as like dealing with individuals that have been traumatized, or being a psychologist or a therapist, I am not one. I actually happened to be at the, at a certain time and a place. I don't say right place, the right time, or wrong place, the wrong time. It just happened to be at a certain time in a certain place. Out of, the need, I was an MBSR teacher, a meditation teacher. And I was thrust into suddenly serving populations that were dealing with trauma because I live in Broward County, Florida. I was, affected emotionally and as a community leader, and also somebody with a son that was in high school when the shooting happened at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, which is in Broward County. And being a meditation teacher and a community organizer already in the county, and somebody that was very active politically as well at the time and still, I was sort of looked to by others as, how can we use mindfulness to help alleviate some of this pain? And so I really had to approach it with just great care. I had to approach the individuals, students, parents whose children were murdered on that day, parents who had children that were injured, teachers who were dealing with great trauma because of what happened in their classrooms. And I really looked to the community that we have around the world and really around the country of mindfulness teachers and researchers. I'm so fortunate that we have a leader like Dr. Amishi Jha here at the University of Miami, who was a great resource, and people like David Trelevin, who is really on the forefront of, and has written a book on the topic actually, and does a podcast on the topic of trauma-informed mindfulness. And so just being able to pick the brains of, be pointed in the direction of research and best practices that I could incorporate into my delivery as a teacher, and also understand where activation points are that I need to recognize, be aware of, and know what to do if they come up, was really imperative and important. The other thing is that I also work hand in hand, like when I'm in teaching a retreat to a specific population that was, for example, is dealing with trauma due to gun violence. We always have a therapist. I always make sure that there is a therapist that is co-teaching with me or co-leading or available, whether it's in person or even online nowadays. And so, it's something that you don't necessarily, I don't think, or at least that I didn't have a game plan and say, like, I want to treat these types of individuals, or I want to teach this type of a population. I just happened to be at a certain place at a certain time where there was a need. And I recognized that there was a gap in what I was delivering, and I needed to fill the gap with information and training and best practices. And so I managed to do that, and I found the work to be very gratifying and the need to be very great, because what we learned in Parkland served as a model for, unfortunately, all the additional subsequent communities that experienced mass shootings and the communities that experience gun violence every single day in this country.
Wow. So, it's all of a sudden you're thrust into a situation and you don't normally think of the term mindfulness as kind of triage. I mean,
Right.
You were like right there. How many days after were you like on campus or with survivors, or that's the right term, survivors, or?
Yeah, they're survivors and victims, basically, right? Victims, families, survivors. I was already involved within 24 hours. The shooting was on February 14th, and really within the first 24 hours of the shooting, I was already involved in working with organizers for March for Our Lives, working with the county, working on, just in different capacities, like I said, as a political leader, as a community organizer, but then also as a mindfulness teacher.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And so I have two teenage boys. Thankfully, we've had some lockdowns, drills, and stuff like that. One time,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to trivialize it, but in my boys' high school, the school was locked down, and my son is tweeting from under a desk, and it turned out some kid had a super soaker, a toy gun outside, and it was very real. I mean, thank God it wasn't real. But
Right.
so did teens or the parents, or probably a lot of them, have never even considered mindfulness or meditation? And now,
Sure.
were they like resistant, or like, whatever you got, let me try it? Or?
I mean, I think people were, after the initial shock, it didn't really wear off, but I would say sunk in. A lot of people were willing to try anything to get relief. They were like, please, like, I need relief. What can I try? What can I turn to? So people were turning to different types of, therapy modalities, like for them new, like EMDR, for example, which is really used a lot with people undergoing trauma. It was, a time when I think people are just open to listening and trying, especially if somebody within the community says, this worked for me, you should try it. And so one of the things that I was able to do really early on was partner up with an organization called Survivors Empowered, and their website is survivorsempowered.org. And Survivors Empowered was founded by Sandy and Lonnie Phillips, whose daughter was murdered at the Aurora movie theater shooting. And they sold all of their belongings after that happened and decided that they were going to live a nomadic life, that in an RV basically, and go become advocates and be on the scene after any mass shooting in this country. So essentially what they've become is like the FEMA of mass shootings. I hate to say that, but with the frequency of what happens in this country on a daily basis, we need that. We need to have some sort of an organization. And unfortunately, since the federal government doesn't want to provide that type of an organization, certainly they can also help provide the solution so that we don't even need that type of organization. But Sandy and Lonnie really have, mobilized and become that. They've filled that need. So they now have a network of survivors and victims around the country. And when a mass shooting happens, like when the shooting happened at Santa Clarita in Saugus, within 24 hours, they had parents, from Columbine, from Parkland, who were reaching out to parents there. Because what happens is that you can say even within 24 hours, just like when Sandy and Lonnie came here, right after the Parkland shooting, they met with some of the parents and said, we know what you're going through. And they really did know what they were going through. Right. But if somebody else comes to you and says, you really should try this, EMDR therapy, or you should try mindfulness, or you should try other types of modalities, and people are like, what do you even know about what I'm going through? And, but as a parent, they could say, like, this is what we did after, and this is what we've learned, and here's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and this is what you can expect. This is how it's going to probably feel, and people are willing to listen to them because there's they speak from an unfortunate experience. They're members of this club that nobody wants to be part of.
Wow. So it's it's not unlike, well, it's a crisis, right? And when people are in
Yeah.
crisis, whether it's a healing crisis, because a lot of people, until they have some kind of healing, either personally or someone in their family, a real crisis, then I'll try anything. And if there's no side effects, even better. But
Mm-hmm.
and wow, so I just want to acknowledge your amazing work. I mean, that's
Thank you.
just phenomenal. Just I can't like even go forward in this conversation because it's just like so special, that you stepped up and then and it seems like you're just getting started. So that's awesome, and you keep bringing energy and insight. And I guess let's pivot to what's happening now.
Sure.
So what I see now uh, is this, I don't know, the great reset or the great whatever the new normal. Not that this has anything to do with anything that's normal, but we have to try to get some new bearings as we move forward. But I think that in some ways, it's a healing crisis for the planet in some ways.
Yeah.
So, and I think that it's forcing people to look at things differently. Not everyone, of course. Science is a plus. Science is important. Science is truth, and all those words are meaningful and important. But now, when I first heard the phrase that you came up with for what's going on during Corona, um, pandemic of love, right? Now, okay, sounds good. But my God, but this is community organizing though, but digitally.
Yeah.
And is it outside of the country yet? Or tell us a
Sure.
little bit about, how it came to be and what it is and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So, Pandemic of Love is actually it's a grassroots volunteer-led organization. We're not a 501c3. The concept started based on a lot of the principles and tenets of what I do pre-pandemic, or what I did pre-pandemic, right? Which is as a self-care activist, help individuals or communities, social justice organizations build formalized and institutionalized communities of care. And also, as a community leader, I am constantly creating networks of mutual aid. So I'll explain what that means. So mutual aid is just a very simple concept, and I will kind of liken it back to I'm sure most of the people listening had parents, I don't care what culture or background they're from, but everybody's parents always use the phrase, or grandparents, back in the day. So back in the day, when we were growing up, we knew who our neighbors were. When Sally next door was sick, we would know, and we would bring her, chicken soup. And when so-and-so down the road, had a death in the family, this would happen. We'd all rally behind that person, and so on, right? And so that network, that fabric, that safety net, if you will, has been lost over the years, of course, after just people started moving into further away from where they grew up. And, as we started moving into cities and life became more fast paced, we don't know who our neighbors are anymore. We could live literally across the hall from somebody in a condominium and not know who our neighbors are. So we certainly don't know what's going on in their life or what their needs are. And so the idea of mutual aid sort of brings that back in the day, back into the present moment. And it formalizes it because it holds individuals accountable and says, like, you are now part of this mutual aid network or this community of care. And here are the needs that people have identified that they have. Someone may have a transportation need. Some person may have a financial need. Some people may need childcare needs. Some people may need, help with cooking or whatever. It just varies. And then there's always individuals that They may also be the individuals in need, but they also have things that they can give, right? And so it's this concept that it takes a village, and really it's that kind of tribal village mentality of like, we look out for one another. And so it's not such a foreign thing, you know, it's a pretty simple concept, but when it's
Right. If you want to borrow a cup of sugar from a neighbor,
yeah,
oh, by the
exactly.
way, I need some olive
Right.
oil, or I need, right. So
Exactly.
it's
Exactly. It's
mutual.
just this exchange network, right? That's sort of this dying breed of way of being, if you will.
It's like a
Um,
cooperative.
yeah, exactly. And we're sort of, it's like a kibbutz. We're bringing it, we're breathing life back into what it means to be part of a community, a true community, right?
Wow.
And so, when the pandemic started to, like, the wave of closures started to happen across the country, it took a while. Florida is usually one of the last states to adopt um, anything really. And so, you know, but we started seeing the wave of like closures in New York and in California and in other states. And then Florida finally, like which is where I live, kind of woke up to the realization that things were going to close. And so people in my community here locally in South Florida, that I support in the Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County areas, I started getting emails and texts and seeing stuff on social media. Of course, Florida being a state that has a lot of hospitality-based, jobs. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people were furloughed, had no income. There's so many people that are members of our community that rely on just, again, the hospitality or restaurant industries to survive, to live, to create a life for themselves. And at that time, there wasn't a game plan or a stimulus plan, or, you know, nobody knew what was going to happen. And we were telling people, well, go stock up your fridge. Well, if you're not getting a paycheck or your restaurant closed and you're already living paycheck to paycheck, how exactly are you supposed to stock up on anything, right? So I decided to create two forms, a give help form and a get help form. Very simple concept using Google Forms. And originally there was no website either. I literally just had two forms. I created a less than 60-second video, and I put it up on my Instagram and Facebook pages. And I said, hey, you know, I know a lot of you are freaking out, you're struggling. And there's a lot of people in our community that have privilege and that are able to fill their own fridge and are happy to help you stock up and get supplies and help you meet the needs that you have. So I posted the two links, went to bed. The next morning when I checked to see what came in, we had over 400 individuals that filled out the form that they were in need, and then over 500 people who filled out the give help links. So I started to just manually match people by email and introduce them and say, you know, hey, Steve, meet Jane. Jane's a single mom of 3, and she needs help with groceries and with diapers for her newborn daughter or something like that. And we would exchange information via email, and then you, Steve, would call Jane or text her and create a human connection and make her feel seen and heard, listen to what issues or concerns she has, and then you would transfer money to her or buy her a gift card to the local supermarket. Or, you know, in some cases, some people have gone above and beyond because they realized, oh, this person I'm talking to is a senior or they're immunocompromised. Why don't you just send me a grocery list? You live, 20 minutes from me. I'll go shopping for you. I'll drop it off at your front door. Like, types of things between perfect strangers, which make us realize that really there are no strangers, right? And so in my original video that I posted, I didn't have a name for this concept, but I did say in that video that, love is a virus, love is contagious, and that love is a cure. And so we can really create a pandemic of love and show that love can conquer fear. and that love can win. And that was it. That was, and the hashtag became Pandemic of Love. And that's how we came up with this, with the website and then everything that subsequently followed. So what's happened is that those original links were shared now thousands of times all around the globe. We have this week we'll have close to 150 micro communities around the world. As far as Australia, Lisbon, Denmark, we have about 14 countries in Latin America right now, who are from Mexico to Ecuador and Argentina. And we're all across the U.S. We're pretty much in every state at this point. But even if we're not, people can still apply. And we've actually just recently, as of this weekend, partnered with the Navajo Nation as well, to help support them with not just financial support, but actually support them with their need for water, for drinking water. And so we're supporting a specific organization that is purchasing barrels, getting the water, delivering it to tribe members and family members all across the four corners. So it's incredible because we have over 500 volunteers that have just risen up and said, what can I do and how can I help? And those volunteers do everything from social media to spend hours and hours of their day matching people within their community, looking at the forms, creating those shidduchs, as I say. I think everybody that's our volunteer now knows that word, whether they know Yiddish or not. I'm like, I basically taught everybody that word. It's hysterical to listen to them saying it.
With a Southern accent, right?
Oh yeah, no, like seriously, like the people that are saying it, even with like a Latin accent, it's great. I love it. It's the best.
Shidduchs.
I know. Yeah, exactly.
That is great.
So awesome. And so, so it's amazing because, we're nearing, 75,000 matches now.
What?
Yep. We've matched, which means that at least 150,000, like human connections have been made between perfect strangers, right?
And and each of those 150,000 are families. So it's like,
yeah, no, the impact is much greater than that, but we're counting the transactions, right? The connection. Wow. So it's 75,000 unique connections that have been made, the impact of which is greater. The median transaction amount, and it could be as little as $50 and up to $5,000, but the median is per transaction, and some people transact multiple times, like weekly with a family, is $135. So when you kind of factor all that out, that means that we've transacted at minimum at least $10 million over the last 7 weeks, almost, maybe, right? Something.
That is astounding.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. It is. It's really, it's amazing because I think it's just a testament to how, the word viral or a virus doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing, that it can actually also be positive things can be spread too, and they can be contagious. So hope and faith and certainly love.
Wow. I mean, it's just beyond, unfathomable or whatever astounding term you can come up with. But, yeah. And I would imagine these people, if you're stuck in a house, mm-hmm. the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and you have a few shekels, and you're safe, and thank God, a lot of people are until, and it reminds me of 9/11, a lot of this, in that in New York, I was in New York City during 9/11, and people that were from Chicago even, or from LA, or not to mention the smaller towns. They just didn't get it. Maybe DC to a certain extent, but they didn't get the trauma and the planes, the fighter jets circling New York for like a month after that. It's like this, like some families are untouched or somewhat, and some are just like I'm here in New Jersey where,
Right.
someone in my son's grade, his father passed away. His best friend's father was in the hospital for 3 weeks. Thank God he's out and doing well. But this, we're just finishing our new website. The developer is in India. She's on lockdown. We have some virtual assistants in the Philippines.
Right.
So this opportunity and thing that you kind of birthed is just, wow.
Yeah. But it's amazing because I think it really is, it's a testament to how people always say, like, what can one person do? I'm one person, like what change?
I said that to my kids. When I heard that you were doing this, told both of my boys, I said, now what are you going to show me? More mindfulness or more like organic cookies, Dad, or whatever,
Yeah.
No, just look what one person can do.
Right.
And,
It's throwing a pebble in the water, that's it. It's just throwing a pebble in the water. I think everybody could be a pebble thrower.
I like it. Pebble thrower. Everyone could be a pebble thrower. I love it.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. So what can someone do to kind of jump in or find out more?
So you can go to pandemicoflove.com and there's a lot of information and interviews and articles that have been written about our movement all around the world that are shared on our media tab. And then on the homepage, there's the links, give help, get help. And then there's a third link that says, I want to get involved. So if somebody's interested in starting a micro community where they live, if there isn't one, we can help you do that. If there is one, we can introduce you to the team that's on the ground locally so that you can help. And if you have a company or a brand that wants to create a partnership, so perfect example is Keller Williams is a big real estate, conglomerate here in the country. We've officially partnered with Keller Williams. And they have something called Red Day that they do every year on May 14th, which is their day of giving. And because they can't go to Habitat for Humanity or build a house or do anything physically, and, they basically decided to partner with Pandemic of Love, and every single one of their realtors is going to be adopting a family for Red Day. And we're going to be
They must have so many people. That's amazing.
So many people. So we have like their microlinks on our partner site. So if you have a small business, if you have a professional, you have an accounting firm or a law firm, or you're a brand or whatever, we can basically, or even a nonprofit. We've partnered with a lot of nonprofits that actually need help. And they are, supporting specific populations. We have a group, for example, called Ovations for the Cure in Framingham, Massachusetts, that their mission is to support women with late-stage ovarian cancer and help them with food and, getting them assistance in the home and all these other things. And suddenly their funds dried up. They had no events. They had no money coming in, but these women still needed help. And so we essentially just used our model to create microlinks for them and to have these women that are, fighting the good fight with their disease, against their disease, are actually now being partnered up with families all over the country that are making sure that they have everything that they need so that they can fight that fight.
Wow. Did you ever think you're going to put on your resume that you're a pebble thrower? I think you're more like a wave maker, actually. This is big.
Well, I don't make the waves. I hope that I can just inspire other people to pick up a pebble and throw it and just give people, just a roadmap and just say, like, here's a roadmap, planting a seed with people so that they can realize that they can from that one seed, they can grow a whole forest, you know? And I think a lot of times people just are so disillusioned or so just powerless, you know, in our society. And it's easy to feel that way nowadays. But I guess it's my hope that I can just inspire people to realize that even as it is said in the Old Testament, right? Like he who saves one person, it is as if he saved the world, the entire world. And it's true. If we can just help one person at a time, one family at a time, what happens is that if everybody did that, if everybody just took responsibility for one family, then imagine how many millions, billions of people we could help and support.
Wow. That's just brilliant. I have another question that I usually finish up these wisdom profiles things with. If you're up for it, let's kind of try it.
Sure.
So first of all, and before I ask this again, and what's your website? How can people find you on social and all that good stuff?
Well, so just to make it easy for people, you could go to pandemicoflove.com and on the about section, there's a little bit about me, but there's also a link out to my personal website. So if you ever, want to know more about me on a personal basis or follow what I'm doing. Also, my Instagram account is, as you mentioned earlier, it's Mindful Skater Girl. That's a whole conversation for another time. Right. But maybe that's something you could share with your sons, because maybe they'll think that that's a little bit cooler.
A little bit cooler. Right.
Yeah,
right.
We could teach them how to meta skate.
What's that?
We could teach them how to meta skate.
Meta skate. I like it. I did some work, and they actually met George Mumford once at a Knick game.
Cool.
The fact that he worked, with a lot of the greats meditating, he was like, wow, Dad, maybe there is something to that. Anyway, so so a question that we like to finish up with these wisdom profiles is, if you were a superhero, what would your origin story be? What was a catalyst to get you into this? Is there one thing that kind of set you on this path?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. The one thing would be sitting in on a living room floor, drinking tea with a Palestinian mother in Gaza.
Wow.
As an Israeli who was raised to hate or be afraid of, I should say, the people on the other side.
The others,
Correct.
Other side, right. So
yeah.
What happened there? You quickly,
I was a college student. I was studying abroad. I did a year abroad at Hebrew University, the Rothberg School. And I was also interning and working with the Ministry of Defense in Israel, doing polling work. Wound up getting a job for the UNHCR, actually, to do some work, field work and polling. And I essentially was assigned to a team to work in the occupied territories of Israel with Palestinian mothers specifically to learn more about human rights violations and, what basically, their hopes and aspirations are for their own children. And it was just an eye-opening experience for me. And it changed the course of my life. Certainly, it helped me to recognize that importance of, and I go back to how it comes full circle to even Pandemic of Love, the human connection, being seen and heard, and how important it is to do that for people and to be able to even have an empathic connection with somebody who you thought you could never have a connection with because they are completely polar opposite of you, or that they're
the enemy of, how do you How do
Correct.
you even?
Yeah, exactly. So I realized all the things we have in common
Wow. Okay.
versus, all the things that separate us. And the walls got knocked down. And when you knock down a wall, what happens? It creates a bridge. So there you go.
Nice way to end. Okay. Shelly, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. I really appreciate the time and the platform. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. You've been listening to Street Smart Wisdom, the podcast from WisdomFeed. You can follow WisdomFeed on Facebook, Twitter, and iTunes. If you haven't, please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on iTunes. We appreciate your feedback. Join us next week for another Street Smart conversation. Thank you for listening.